Hey, it's Bernard Nomberg with another weekly episode of NOMBERG Law Live. Thank you for stopping by for a few minutes. I've got my friend, Birmingham attorney Danny Feldman here with me. Good morning, Danny.
It's good to be here.
Thank you for sharing a few minutes
Sure.
of time with us. Today, we're going to talk about Alabama biking laws, and there's nobody finer in our state than Danny to tell us about that. And we're going to learn about the rules of the road and things, not just common sense things, but things you really should know if you're going to be not only a biker, somebody who's out driving and you encounter bicyclists and the like. But Danny, before we jump into that, let's tell the audience a little bit about yourself personally and your practice and those things.
Sure. Well, I've grown up in Birmingham, went to John Carroll High School, Birmingham Southern College, went to Vanderbilt Law School, and been practicing law now for a long time.
Anchor down.
It's been a long time, 32 years practicing. And I became interested in bicycling because my knees aren't very good, and I've had a number of knee surgeries. And so to stay active, I started cycling and have become an active cyclist now for at least the last 2 decades. I guess it was 1994 when I had two very, very close friends of mine that were cycling out on Lakeshore, and they were hit by a drunk driver. This was 7 o'clock on a Sunday morning. And they suffered really tough injuries. And what I did at that time was I was able to combine my passion, hobby, sport of cycling with my practice of law. And I represented my two friends in that case. And since then, I've represented cyclists throughout the state of Alabama. And I have made that a big part of my practice. And I don't think I'm wrong about this, but I suspect I've represented more injured cyclists than any other lawyer in this state. So I've enjoyed doing it.
And Danny, I've lived in Birmingham for 25 years now, and just driving around the city, exercising, hiking in different parts of the city, I see bicyclists everywhere. We're not in the flat areas of the state like you would be in Montgomery or Dothan. We're getting toward the mountains. And even with that, there are people all over the state, all over the metro area biking, whether it's rural roads or county roads or even some of the major thoroughfares here in town. And I know that becomes a bit of a precarious situation, particularly for drivers of the vehicles who are passing or near them who may not know what they're doing or how to handle it, or for novice bicyclists who really should be knowledgeable of the rules of the road and how they're supposed to treat traffic. So I want to kind of jump into that, because when there's an accident, it seems like that the injuries are quite significant and sometimes lead to death.
Sure. When you have a incident with a cyclist and a motorist, the motorist, the vehicle weighs a couple of thousand pounds, and the bicycle and the rider may weigh a couple of hundred pounds. So there's no real comparison, and the cyclist is going to be injured, and usually fairly significantly. Real quick, what people need to understand, and the law in Alabama is that a bicyclist, a person riding a bike, has the same legal rights, the same rights as anyone driving a car, with very limited exceptions. There are a few exceptions, and I'll talk about that. And of course, with those rights come obligations. So a cyclist has the same obligations as a motorist. In other words, cyclists are supposed to stop at a red light, and the cyclist is to obey the rules of the road. The exceptions, or obviously a bicyclist cannot be on an interstate, which has minimum speed. And a bicyclist is supposed to be as far to the right side of the road as practicable. And that's an important word, and that's in the code. It doesn't mean it's possible. You don't have to be on a gutter. And of course, if you're going to make a left-hand turn as a cyclist, it's not practicable to make a left-hand turn from the far right of the lane. So you have the absolute right, and in fact, I would say legal duty, to move over. You indicate with your arm where you're going, and to make your left-hand turn. But a cyclist, a person riding a bike, has the same rights to the road as any motorist.
But before you get out on the major roads or significant roads outside of even in a neighborhood, I would assume any and every bicyclist needs to know the basic rules of the road and responsibilities, and including what safety precautions, safety gear they should be wearing. So let's talk about safety gear first, Danny, and then let's move on to the basic knowledge that a bicyclist is held to know about.
Yeah, well, the first thing you want to do when you're riding a bike is you want to be seen. So generally speaking, that means you'd want to wear colors that contrast so that you can be seen by motorists. There's different thoughts about bike helmets. The law requires you to wear a bike helmet if you're 16 and under. A lot of cyclists are not 16 and under. But generally speaking, I think most people would agree that it's probably a good idea to wear a bike helmet. So those are, two of the things. And then, of course, if you're riding your bicycle at night or in the dark, and then, for instance, I cycle and Tuesday, Thursday mornings at 5 o'clock in the morning. We hit the road and we're out, and it's dark. It's dark, so you want to be seen. And what the law says is you're supposed to have a front headlight that can be seen from 500 feet and a rear reflector. And it says reflector as opposed to a blinky light that can be seen from 100 to 500 feet. I would tell folks, you want to meet the law, so reflector is fine, but you want to be seen and not run over and kill. So, for instance, most cyclists that ride when it's dark will have not only a reflector, but a blinky light or reflective clothing of some type. And again, it's just so you are seen by people that are driving.
What about, are you allowed to wear, or is it advised not to? I don't know the law about this, about wearing earbuds or airbuds, or having, preoccupied by listening to something.
Yeah, well, that's a good question. You're not prohibited from doing that. You can certainly wear earbuds and listen to what you want, and you see cyclists doing that. I would recommend to people that you don't. There are two reasons. One is to the extent you can't hear what's around you, it may slow down your ability to react to something. Secondly, Alabama is what's known as a contributory negligence state, which means if you're 1% at fault and that 1% leads to the result, you cannot recover. 46 of the other states are comparative. And so if you're 1% at fault, in case worth $100, you get 99. In Alabama, you get 0. And although as a lawyer, I would say someone wearing earbuds, it's hard for me to see how that made the wreck happen. I mean, if someone cuts in front of you or all the rest. But all that being said, as a lawyer, I would prefer my client not have had those earbuds in and not have to listen to the defendant bring up, well, you could have heard and done something. So,
well, Danny, that leads me to this: of all the cases that you've dealt with and the people you've represented over the last so many years, what are some of the common themes of the way these accidents, these collisions have occurred?
Yeah, it's that there, and actually we have some names for them. There's what's called the right cross, and that is where a cyclist is in front and someone's overtaking them, and then they make that hard right in front of them.
Where a car comes in front of
Correct.
them to create the collision. Okay.
Correct. And oftentimes the reason that happens is cyclists can go a lot faster than folks think. And in fact, coming down a hill, depending on how steep it is, you can get to 40 or 50 miles an hour. Even on a flat road, depending on how fast you are, how the wind's blowing, you can go 20, 25 miles an hour. So sometimes motorists that are overtaking a cyclist, tend to think the cyclist is going 5 miles an hour, and they're not. And so as they overtake them, they realize that in order to make this turn, they cut in front and they hit the cyclist. So that's one way.
Does that sometimes cause the cyclist to go over the vehicle upon the collision?
Sure.
Ooh, that could be a really bad result.
Right. You get a lot of broken collarbones or worse. Another one is you have the right cross, you have the left hook, and that's where a vehicle is coming toward the cyclist, so going opposite, and the person makes a left in front of them. And it's very much the same. Oftentimes they don't realize how fast the cyclist is going. So that is very common as well. Intersections, as you would expect, is the primary place where collisions occur. And then, although it's as a cyclist, what you worry about the most is you're riding down the road and someone just comes up and smashes you from behind.
And you never see them.
And you never see them. And those tend to be some of the worst. The statistics are that is not your typical wreck. That is maybe 10 or 15%. But those happen. They, from inattentive drivers, from drunk drivers, from drivers that are texting and driving, those happen. So that's the other way they happen.
Have you found when you're taking the deposition or going through these cases and you're trying to get the testimony from the driver who, in your case, caused this accident or this event, are you finding that those drivers are well versed or knowledgeable about how to treat bicyclists or the people who are on the bikes?
It depends. I would say for the most part, they know. I mean, that for the most part, they know. I can remember one particular case, and this was on John Rogers Road. If you're familiar with Birmingham, it's a 5-lane road, 2 lanes in either direction, the middle lane. And because the race course has gone belly up, it's a low traffic road. And there was a case that we had, and the motorist saw the cyclist, and it was a Sunday morning. She said there was no traffic. And she said, I just didn't get over far enough. And she hit him. And it's, she knew that there was just absolutely no reason that should have happened. But that is not atypical. The 2 biggest driver excuses that you hear are, one, I didn't see him. And of course, that makes sense if you're texting and driving.
Right.
And
occupied.
That's right. And the other one is he or she swerved in front of me. They swerved right in front of me. And again, that is what it may seem like if you're not paying attention to what you're doing to the last second. As a cyclist, and I ride 5,000 or 6,000 miles a year, I can tell you that cyclists don't go swerving around. It just doesn't happen. I mean, rarely there may be something and you move over slightly, but cyclists, when you're riding down the road, you're typically not going to be swerving around.
And for those of you just joining us, thank you for tuning in. I'm with Danny Feldman. We're talking about bicycle laws and rules of Alabama. Now, Danny, I know that you recently have written a book that is very informative. Let's talk about your book and show the folks what it looks like and how can they get copies of it.
Sure. It's a legal handbook, and it basically reviews the rules of the road here in Alabama. These are available at almost any bike shop we have throughout the state, and that's including Mobile and Montgomery and Huntsville have given them out to bike shops. And if they don't have the bike shop, you're certainly welcome to contact me.
What's a good number? How can folks?
A good number is 205-254-6060.
Okay. And we'll put that in the comments section as well.
Or just my email is dfeldman@lewisandfeldman.com. Those are 2 good ways to get me.
And tell us a little bit about what's in the book. What can folks expect to read?
Yeah, what's in the book is we've taken all the laws that regard cycling in Alabama and just put it in easy to format, non-legal wording to read. And so it gives you the highlights of what the law is as regards cycling in Alabama. It touches on, for instance, e-bikes, which are becoming more and more popular. I know it won't surprise a lot of you to know that Alabama's a little bit behind the times in that there's no law concerning e-bikes just yet. That will come, though. I mean, it will come.
Define what is an e-bike.
An e-bike, E stands for electric, and it's basically an electric assist. It's a bike that has a motor, and they're small motors, and there's 2 classifications of e-bikes. One has a speed that can go up to 20 miles an hour, and one up to 28. And there's different levels of power that you can set it at. So for those of us, as you become older and you want to maybe keep up with the ride, they're nice. My wife and I were in San Diego, and I've ridden an e-bike once, and she didn't think I'd want to because you're not a real cyclist. But I rode it, and we went up a hill that was a steep hill that had I been cycling on my own, I would have been doing good to go 5 or 6 miles an hour. We went up at 15 miles an hour chatting, and it was
game changer.
It was fun. It was a lot of fun, and you'll see more and more e-bikes. I mean, I'm convinced that they are here to stay, and I think it's great because I think a lot more folks, especially in a hilly town like Birmingham, will be able to ride.
Are those bikes that people own, or are they ones that you rent, or both?
Both. Both. The Zip bikes that I think are still here and were here for a while, there were some of those that were e-bikes. And I know Zip is moving out of Birmingham, and there's another group moving in. And some of that fleet will be e-bikes. And of course, you can purchase e-bikes as well. And most of your local bike shops will tell you that as a percentage of purchases, e-bikes certainly sell more in 2019 and 2015. And I think it'll be more in 2020 and 2021 and down the road.
Sure. Well, guys, if you have a local bike shop that's in your community that does not have Danny's guide here to biking laws in Alabama, I highly recommend that you pick it up either there or get in touch with Danny at his firm, and he'll get you a copy of it. Danny, let's kind of pivot a little bit. Sometimes I see large groups of bikers going down different roads, and they all seem to be talking and carrying on a little bit. Or sometimes I'll just see individual bikers, and I want to talk about both groups because it's completely, in my mind, completely different dynamics if you're alone versus when you're in a group. So let's talk about when you're biking alone, some safety tips, some ideas, some things that not only the biker should utilize, but drivers who get engaged with them in the proximity, what they should be thinking.
Sure. Couple of things. When you ride alone, and I'll ride alone sometimes. One, you always want to let someone know where you're going. That's number one. So I'll let my wife know where I'm going. Two, now there's a lot of apps that people have that will show where you're going in real time. Sure. Strava, Garmin, GoPro. Some of these apps actually have something that signals if there is an emergency, and they can tell there's an emergency when there's a abrupt stop. And so then your wife or your husband will get notice of that. So those are two really good things for cyclists to consider when you're riding on your own. As a motorist, we have in Alabama now what's called the 3-foot law. And basically it says you have to give 3 feet when passing. You have to give 3 feet of distance. And it's applicable on roads 45 miles an hour and less without a double yellow line. So as a motorist, you want to give a cyclist room. I mean, whether they're a single or a group, you want to give a cyclist room in case something should happen, they should fall over or whatever. And so that's as a, and I'm a motorist too. Like I'm a cyclist, but I may cycle 5,000 or 6,000 miles a year. I drive my car 25,000 or 30,000 miles a year. So, I know how it is when you're passing a cyclist, you want to make sure you have room. And if you're on a 2-lane road and there's traffic coming, obviously you want to wait a few seconds. I mean, it's not the end of the world if you're delayed by a few seconds or, even a few minutes, as long as you don't put someone at risk.
All right, and those are all great common sense and practical, and as well as the requirements under our laws about dealing with single bike and vehicles passing or coming within close range. Now let's talk about the group rides. And I want to say, maybe I saw in here, you guys have seen this many, many times on the road where you've got multiple bicyclists, and sometimes they're all behind each other in a row, or sometimes they'll be side by side. So talk to us, Danny, a little bit about, from the bicyclist or the cyclist standpoint, what are their rules? What are their requirements?
Sure. And what we call that as a cyclist is the peloton, is the group. And the reason you do it is when you're not pulling, you're not the first person, you're drafting, and you save a lot of energy. I mean, it's amazing how much energy you save. So that's why cyclists will line up one behind the other. What the law says, and what groups do, is the law allows in Alabama cyclists to ride 2 abreast. So you can ride 2 abreast. And there's reasons why that makes some sense too. If you have, say, 12 people riding, and if you had them all single file, that's a line of 12 people. If you have them 2 abreast, that's 6 people. And sometimes it's easier for a car to get around a group half as long.
Mhm.
And so that's why you'll see groups sometimes riding in pairs like that. As a cyclist, when you're riding in a group, just like you want to be predictable to cars and motors, you want to be predictable to your fellow cyclists. You want to make sure that when you move out in the group, you let someone know, and there's an etiquette involved, and it's important because you are riding very close behind the person in front of you, usually 6 inches to 3 feet. So
Wow.
it's close, at 20 miles an hour or better.
Danny, when it comes to hand signals, you've got to know hand signals as a bicyclist to be able to tell others around you what you're doing. But as a driver, are you also held to know what those hand signals are?
Yeah, it's interesting. The law in Alabama gives the hand signal for a right-hand turn, which is straight up with your right hand or horizontal out. It does not, in the code, address the left-hand turn. But the common sense deal as a cyclist is you want to let a motorist know what you're doing. So if I'm going to make a left-hand turn, I've got my left hand out, and as I'm slowing, I'm showing the slowing motion to the motorist behind me, because you just want to let these folks know what you're doing. Just like if you're driving a car and you're going to make a left-hand turn, you turn on your left turn signal. As a cyclist, you want to make sure you do the same thing to let folks know who you're riding with and motorists know what you're going to do.
Well, guys, it's when a car and a bike collide, it's never a good thing. And typically it can be a very bad thing, usually for the bicyclists themselves. You're hearing it from the very best in Alabama. Danny has many years of experience, not only as a cyclist himself, but representing individuals in these types of collisions. Danny, if folks want to get in touch with you or your firm, if they have a case, if they want to get your handbook or just have questions, how do they get in touch with you?
Sure. Our telephone number is area code 205-254-6060. You can email me at dfeldman@lewisandfeldman.com. The and is spelled out. You can go to Alabama Bike Law, www.alabamabikelaw, and that website will get to me as well.
And we'll put all of those links, those websites, in the Facebook comments. So you guys will have easy access to that. Danny, as we're getting close to the conclusion of our conversation, first of all, thank you for your expertise, your knowledge, and all of your information you're sharing. Is there anything that we've bypassed? Is there anything we haven't gone over that the average cyclist, whether you're new to the sport or you've been doing this as long as Danny has, or you're a driver who's just not as informed as they should be? Is there any other things that maybe we should share with the folks who are watching this?
Just two things that come to mind. And one is, as a cyclist, you want to be predictable and let folks know what you're going to do. You always want to do that so you're not surprising the motorist. And then as a motorist, what I'd say is, I urge you to treat the cyclist not as an obstruction or someone that's keeping you from getting to where you want to go, but as somebody's father, mother, brother, sister, son, or daughter, because there are instances where we have of just really aggressive driving or intentionally wrong driving, buzzing someone, or doing what's called a punishment pass because you're aggravated.
Mm-hmm.
And the people that are riding on the road are people that your neighbors and they could be your family members, and it's just not worth it to get to where you're going, to risk someone's life, to get to where you're going 20 seconds or 30 seconds earlier. And so I wish motorists would take that into mind when they see a cyclist and pass a cyclist and are dealing with cyclists.
Yeah, guys, you got to learn the rules of the road, not only as a cyclist, but as a driver who encounters them. If you have questions or concerns, get in touch with Danny here. He'll be able to set you straight or get you the information. I want to thank you, Danny, for your time, your expertise and experience, of course, and having some time for us today. Guys, as we always do, Tuesdays at 10 o'clock Central, 8 a.m. Pacific, NOMBERG Law Live. We try to bring to you interesting people in their areas of expertise, and Danny sure fits that bill. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
You're most welcome. Guys, that'll conclude it for today, and we'll catch you again another time. Be well.
Good.
That's it. Thank you.